I come to you at a time with a wonderful history at CUNY when we are experiencing our highest enrollment to date. More than 260,000 degree credit students, including more high-achieving students than ever before, are studying at the City University of New York. And while we know that economic hardships have driven many New Yorkers to college to acquire new skills and attain additional certification, our decade-long growth is also a manifestation of two ongoing factors. First, the university continues to be recognized for its academic quality, and it's become a destination for students seeking an exemplary education. Second, students are coming to CUNY better prepared for college-level work, and we're therefore seeing better retention rates across the university. We take pride in the increased interest in CUNY and the improved performance of our students. However, our explosion in enrollment, an additional 65,000 students since 1999, poses serious challenges. The need for faculty and the demands on space are also at unprecedented levels, with our freshman applications for fall 2010 also showing a double-digit increase. We expect these demands to grow even more urgent. At the same time, the university's commitment to quality is unwavering. The Macaulay Honors College class of 2013 has an average SAT score of around 1,400. Our recent Brooklyn Macaulay graduate, Ryan Marola, was just named one of 9 scholars nationally to be a 2011 Mitchell Scholar. And students across the CUNY campuses are also winning competitive national awards. Most recently, 5 CUNY students were awarded National Science Foundation graduate fellowships for 2009. Hunter College was named the nation's #2 best value public college for 2010 and by Princeton Review and USA Today. Queens College and Baruch College were named to the Princeton Review's Best Northeastern Colleges list. And in November, Hunter College Distinguished Lecturer Colin McCann won the 2009 National Book Award in Fiction, the top American prize for literature. And 3 outstanding educators just joined the university in 2009. Karen Gould, president of Baruch College, Felix Matos Rodriguez, president of Ostos Community College, and William Pollard, president of Medgar Evers College. We are also pleased to announce that based on recent actions by the National Accrediting Agency, we anticipate that the new CUNY School of Public Health will soon be fully accredited. It is the very first public school of public health in New York City and the only one in the country that has a focus on urban health. 2 prominent scholars and medical doctors from Harvard Medical School were recently recruited and have accepted offers to the CUNY School of Public Health. Distinguished scientists David Himmelstein and Steffi Woolhanger. We look forward to them joining us. These are only a few of the countless ways that the entire university community is working diligently to give students the best educational experience possible. Just as our citizens turn to public higher education to help them prepare for an uncertain future, so does the state depend on CUNY and SUNY to build the workforce and innovation capacity of New York. And I am delighted that Chancellor Nancy Zimpher is installed as the Chancellor of the State University of New York. From the very first day that she arrived, she and I have had several conversations, usually once or twice a week, and I wish her well, and I know that she is going to have a profound impact on the future development of this great state university system. Let me talk briefly about the budget that was presented by the governor and give you a couple of thoughts, and here's where I will stray from my testimony. You have it for the record so that I can give you my own particular sense of where I think this budget is helpful and where I think it is deeply harmful to the university. On the budget recommendation, the executive budget recommends a total of $1.8 billion in operating aid, this reflecting a decrease of state support of about $84 million, offset by additional funding of $91 million for mandatory costs and collective bargaining, and $11 million from the FY 2010 tuition increase. The $11 million reflects an increase from 20% to 30% in the amount of the FY 2010 tuition increase retained by the university. And I want to talk about that in just a minute, because I think that was a paradigm shift for both the State University and the City University, and we were delighted to be part of making that happen. A portion of the $84 million reduction is about $21 million related to across-the-board proposals to reduce salary and fringe benefit costs to be negotiated with the union. The proposed reduction will have a very real effect on the work of our senior colleges. Since 1999, these colleges have together welcomed almost 38,000 additional students to their campuses. That's an entire New York university, 38,000 increase. Our colleges remain uncompromising in their commitment to academic quality, but the fact remains that continued budget cuts combined with growing enrollments means a serious strain on resources and an acute need to add full-time faculty and academic support. You may recall when I testified last year that the central theme of my administration when I became Chancellor in 1999 was to rebuild the full-time faculty of the City University of New York. When I came in as Chancellor, we were seated at about 5,400 full-time faculty, down from 11,000 full-time faculty in the mid-1970s. And I'm pleased to say that during this period of time, we have added an additional 1,700 full-time faculty to the ranks of the City University of New York, unprecedented, I might say, within the higher education communities across the United States. There has been much discussion in the past several hours about the governor's proposal for the Public Higher Education Empowerment and Innovation Act, which recommends a number of adjustments in the way in which the university, both SUNY and CUNY, manage its affairs. Let me talk a little about this because some of this is not new. Some of this I have been talking to the Joint Committee for several years. And let me go over some of the ideas in this budget and provide a little more texture on how some of this is going to benefit the university and how it would work. First of all, CUNY, several years ago, established this new finance vehicle, which we called the CUNY Compact. It was an affirmation that the City University can no longer depend on its major two supporters, meaning the State of New York and the students through tuition. That if we were going to have an investment vehicle, we had to have philanthropy part of the equation. We also had to have targeted enrollment management part of the equation, and that the university had to take ownership to providing good business practices in the way in which it managed its affairs. Part of the subject of the compact was to provide a predictable set of tuition actions. And we have acted very responsibly. I used to talk about a basket of economic indicators. We talked about the Consumer Price Index. We talk about the regional HEPI. And I told this committee that the HEPI is about 150 basis points, usually, ahead of the CPI. It is a more enriched index than the CPI, and that we thought that a composite of that would be a good way to inform how we would structure a tuition increase. Let's think about how the state of New York has dealt with tuition increases, and let me give it to you in the rawest terms possible. We heard Assemblyman Miller saying, yes, in bad times, the student is taxed because the state doesn't have the revenue to support the operating needs, and in good times, very little happens. But let me put it in a different context. It's about when you were born. Your age, you can enter CUNY and SUNY and go 4, 5, or 6 years and not see a tuition increase at all. Why? Because the state of the economy was such that that was not needed. But if you're a student that was born a few years earlier or a few years later, because you came into more economic turmoil, you had very steep tuition increases. We instituted tuition increases in the 1990s of 20 to 25%, as did SUNY. It was obscene. It is the most regressive way of taxing students to support public higher education. It has to be changed. And that's why I proposed 8 years ago, and since each year have talked to this committee about the need to have a tuition schedule that is understood by students and understood by their families, and do it in a way that the increases are gradual, and that if any student was prevented from matriculating as a result of that small increase, the pledge that I gave was that we would make that student whole, and we have not walked away from that pledge. So when we talk about a more predictable way of doing tuition, we have a track record. The record is clear, the data are clear. We have never raised tuition more than a few percentage points, and we have never allowed a student to be in harm's way. We have always captured that. That is part of the governor's proposal. The governor's proposal, from where I sit, supports the compact. All of our mandatory costs are covered, and a process of, call it a rational tuition policy, a policy informed by an index, is in place. We also support differential tuition, and let me describe in a little more detail so that I think you understand the way in which differential tuition would work. Largely, it's about graduate students. It's not that much about undergraduate students. And it is about investing in those programs. If we were to charge, for example, another $200 for a graduate program, that incremental increase goes back to the program. And that's why the students were supporting a differential tuition on the basis of program, because they knew that the money was not being absorbed into our treasury and no one knew where it went. It was going directly back to the program to invest in it for more faculty, for more instrumentation, for all of the things that would make those programs supportable. So from where I sit, this is not new news. We support a rational policy for tuition. We support differential tuition on a program basis, provided those dollars go back for investment purposes. The other part of the program that the governor has proposed has to do with dealing with greater accountability and greater business sense in the way in which we manage our business affairs And let me explain to you some of the reasons for us. Anything over $20,000, and when we go through a procurement process, we have to send out for 3 bids. So someone will go to a dean and said, we need a piece of instrumentation in our laboratory. We have to go, and we need it now. And this conversation takes place in October. Well, do you know that because of the procurement process, and say this piece of equipment was $25,000, we may have to wait until May to get that piece of equipment. By that time, the semester is over, the students that needed that equipment are gone, and they're going on to something else. So so that is that part of the proposal that we are very, very supportive of. And we understand there would be a post-audit, which is good, because there should be good government overseeing the way in which public dollars are being spent. With respect to land use, we have created many partnerships with business. Our 2 new dorms were done on the basis of innovation in working with private developers, and the result of those costs have come down considerably because they needed something and we needed something, and we were able to do the arbitrage on what those delta on the costs were to get the things done. The new School of Public Health, which is going to be a dramatic new addition to the City University of New York, was done on a public-private partnership. The move of our social work school was done on a public-private partnership. So CUNY has done this, needs to do it more, and any regulatory burdens that can be lifted a bit to allow us to do more is a good thing. That's the way that I see the proposals being provided by the governor. Let me conclude my testimony because I said that I would be brief, and I promised the chair, and he smiled and affirmed that that's a good thing. So a smile is good. I am deeply concerned about the community college cut. I think this is a cut that, from where I sit, makes absolutely no sense. You know, we got into, I live and I work in New York City. I have close connections to the financial services world. I know that world, I wouldn't say intimately, but I know it enough to understand how we got into this problem. And we got into this problem in part because banks and other financial institutions would take short-term debt, long-term debt, securitize that debt, and make it look like stocks. Now, with stocks, there are very, very real regulatory frameworks in place that do not allow for shenanigans to take place. But when you take long-term debt and securitize it and make it look like stocks, this is where people got into tremendous problems. This was the problems with the mortgage-based securitizing mortgages and collateralized debt obligations. All of this stuff has played havoc in New York City, and as a result of that, we're seeing large unemployment. The latest numbers in New York, 10.6. I think that number is going to go up. It's particularly acute in parts of the state. Wall Street is going to be a very different place than it was just a few years ago, and we're not going to be able to depend on the revenue that we've all expected to live by. And people are not being able to get jobs, and they're coming to the community colleges. They're coming to the community colleges to get training. They're coming to the community colleges to compete for jobs that are there, but they don't have the skills. To shut the door to these students at these community colleges, I think, is a very, very poor strategy. And I implore you to really take a look at this clearly and try to turn this around. We must keep the community colleges at SUNY and at CUNY open for students and help expand it. We are bursting at the seams with the community colleges. To see another $285 reduction in base aid over the $130 base aid reduction that was implemented last year will have a chilling effect on the university, and we cannot permit that to happen. It doesn't make sense as we look how to unwind from this recession that we have been in, that largely was a result of poor practices and high risk, yes, in the financial services world, and it affects New York in a very profound way. We have to keep these community colleges open. So I ask that you pay particular attention to that. And the last thing that I would talk about, and again, deviating from my text, is the capital program. Capital creates jobs. We have facilities now that are completely designed and they're ready to start construction. And there are people who have the skills ready to build these buildings that we desperately need at the City University of New York. We don't have land. We don't have land, unfortunately. I wish we had land in the 5 boroughs. We don't. So what we have to do is to refurbish and build facilities from old facilities to use them in a much more efficient way. And if we are talking about creating jobs and helping the university to work with the state to enhance its very poor balance sheet, and all of you know New York State has a very poor balance sheet, we must look at our capital program as one area in which the university can, through its needs, help to create an environment that I think will be helpful. Mr. Chairman, I will stop at that particular time. I pledged to you I would do it, and I'll take any question that any of you would like to provide.
Thank you, Chancellor. In fact, your comments particularly on the community colleges, I just set aside the questions I was going to ask about it, about the reductions in base aid and TAP and so on, because I think your statement is a very strong one, and I happen to agree with you completely. Couple of real quick questions based upon your testimony today. The governor proposed a cap on out-of-state students. Now, I know the out-of-state students at CUNY, in large part, many of them are foreign students. And I represent an immigrant community, as much of the city of New York is an immigrant community. What's going to be the effect of this cap on foreign and out-of-state students?
You know, our country was built on the backs of immigrants. I think all of our parents or grandparents came here from another country, and thankfully they arrived on our shores, and they created great music, great science. They became some of the most profound people in commerce and finance. And if we had cut the ability of these people to come and study here, I don't know that we would be the country that we are today. So when you ask me, what is the effect on putting a cap on our students from out of state, which are largely immigrant students, I think the effect derived from our own experience in the past is going to be the same thing. There are people that will no longer have the ability to study at this university and no longer be able to not only improve their lives, but improve the lives of the community. That's where I see the problem.
And in fact, the initial when City College was founded in the 1840s, the objective was to educate the sons and daughters of sons primarily at that time of immigrants. And it seems to me that mission really hasn't changed.
That's what we do.
Yeah. A couple of other questions. You spoke about having differential tuition for certain subject areas, certain programs that may be more expensive to administer. And I assume we're referring to programs with labs and so on, the so-called STEM subjects. Is this going to intensify the existing stratification by gender or by economic income or by race that could exist?
Senator Stavitsky, let me again, first of all, the answer is unequivocally no. The reason that I am supporting this and have been supporting it for a long time is that I think we need an investment vehicle for very high-priced programs. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. When I was president of Baruch College, as I was leaving the campus, and I had a wonderful 7 years as president there, I started a program. It's either a Master of Science or a Master of Arts, I forget what the degree is, in financial engineering, the so-called quants. And in my previous life, I used to train a lot of those people, so I know that world, and maybe we can be blamed for some of the problems that we're facing. But the fact is that those students leave with jobs, and they are getting jobs north of $100,000 a year. It's a highly coveted program. NYU has a very strong program. Columbia has a very strong program. Baruch College has a very strong program. But because it is a Master's of Arts or a Master's of Science, we are restricted from charging a tuition for any other, compared to any other Master of Arts or Master of Science program. So I have a group of students that are taking a Master of Arts in Philosophy, and another group of students taking a Master of Arts in Fine Arts, and another group of students taking a Master of Arts in Financial Engineering. And because this program is so in demand, and because these students leave with great jobs, and because I can use the money to invest in that particular program, why not do it? The students even say to me, we'll support this, but show us where the money is going. And my pledge to all of you is that it's not going to be absorbed into the Treasury, where there's no audit of where those dollars go. It goes right to the program where we're creating the levy. And that's how I conceive of differential tuition by program. And that's why I think it is a good thing for CUNY.
I have a problem with differential tuition by college. In Queens County, we have Queens College and we have York College. And I am troubled that if we initiate or if we have a program where Queens College can charge more than York College, that we're going to put York College in jeopardy. How do you feel about that?
I am, for CUNY, it's a non-starter. I don't support differential tuition by campus. It doesn't make sense for CUNY because we are a tightly compacted university living in each other's backyard with a lot of flows back and forth. SUNY is a different situation. SUNY is much more spread out, has much more variance in the kind of institutions, and there you heard from Chancellor Zimfer being supportive of that. But for us, when I think about differential tuition, it's on a program basis, largely weighted towards graduate education. And it probably is just going to be in a few areas, but I need that ability to make investments into those programs.
Even though the governor has trying to eliminate graduate TAP.
I'm sorry?
I said, and the governor is trying to eliminate graduate TAP.
Well, I am not supportive of eliminating graduate TAP. Right.
Two quick ones. Last year, I visited the ASAP program at Queensborough Community College, which is in my district, and I'm very proud of Queensborough. They have a wonderful program for high school students and How can that program be replicated? I think there are 6 campuses, but...
Well, let me tell you about ASAP. It derived from a night when I was walking my apartment at 2:30 in the morning. It's absolutely a true story, where I was lamenting about the very poor graduation rates at community colleges around the United States. The 3-year graduation rates nationally at community colleges are about 25%. That means that 1 out of 4 students that are enrolled in a 2-year program graduate in 3 years. And there are lots of reasons for that, and a lot of very good reasons and a lot of lousy reasons. And I try to conceptualize, not knowing as much about community colleges, because I never studied at a community college, I never taught at a community college, but community colleges are the asset class in higher education that is exploding in size. 45% of the students studying in the United States today study at a community college. They are the point of entry. And I wanted to think about how we could create a program. And I had breakfast with Michael Bloomberg, our mayor, and I said to him, I have an idea, and I'd like to test it out. Would you support it? And he said, yes. And we supported it, and let me give you the data. We will graduate a cohort of students. We started of about 1,200 students, and it was started at each of our 6 community colleges. We will graduate 60% of those students in 3 years in the ASAP. Now, if that isn't a paradigm shift, I don't know. Now, it requires an investment. I don't want you to leave here thinking this is just business as usual. It was an investment, but a well-thought-out program. And from that ASAP, we are now conceiving a new community college, totally redesigned, derived from the principles that the ASAP program was built upon, and we're hoping, and tomorrow I'll be in Washington speaking with Undersecretary of Education Kapner, who is very interested in our new idea. The Gates Foundation has pumped in a lot of money into this idea, and I'm hoping that we can push forward using this as a model, as a reform in how community colleges are engaging with students in ways different than they're engaging with students right now.
Some of it. I must tell you, when I had the call from President Marti, and he was so excited that I should come over, drop everything, come over and look at the program, and I left with the same feeling of excitement that this has great potential. Last question, which I think is sort of the summary of the other questions as they involve community colleges. I find it very upsetting, and I attended a meeting of the Education Commission of the States where this was an issue, that 75% of our students in the CUNY community colleges, or 73.7, I think, % of the students in the CUNY community colleges need remediation, whether it be reading, writing, or math. That the skills they bring are so limited that they have to satisfy these requirements before they can continue. What can we do? Now, to tell me that, well, a couple of years ago it was 85% doesn't make me feel any better.
Oh, it doesn't make anybody feel better. I don't want to spend
What can we do?
I don't want to spend money on remediating students, but this is a national problem. This is not a problem unique to New York State. It is ubiquitous across the United States. And the United States it's really after World War II that community colleges were really first conceived. It was rare to find a community college before World War II. So it's really an American phenomenon. We need to do a better job in preparing students to come to a university, whether it's a two-year college or a baccalaureate institution. Too many of our students, unfortunately, are leaving schools poorly educated. And some of them are severely poorly educated. And it troubles all of us greatly. And that is one of the reasons that in our administration, we have spent as much time developing relationships with the DOE schools. And Joel Klein and I now have groups that are working, a group with SUNY and a group with CUNY and a group with the DOE, to drill down deep into the bedrock of the experiences that students have at our high schools and junior high schools, and working with the teachers so that they understand the expectations of faculty at universities and better prepare them. It's going to take a long time, but this is something that we must do. Community colleges, as part of their overall mission, remediate for deficiencies that should have been dealt with in earlier stages of their education.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you for the leadership that you have been providing over the last, since 1999, last
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
11 years.
Mr. Chairman, I neglected to introduce part of my leadership team here, if you would let me do
Please.
that. All the way on my left is Pete Jordan, who handles student affairs at the university. Mark Shaw, who's recently joined us as Senior Vice Chancellor for Budget, Finance, and Financial Planning, is right here, and we're delighted to have Mark. Iris Weinschall, who does magic with our real estate and has unclogged the pipeline of lots of projects, and that's why we need more money, because she needs to be fed, and she does it well. And everybody knows Jay Hershenson, our Senior Vice Chancellor, who handles our government relations and is our top communication officer, and he's also Secretary to the Board of Trustees. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're joined once again by Senator DeFrancesco, as well as Senator Brian Foley.
Deborah Glick, the question.
Nice to see you, Chancellor. I will try to be as succinct as you were in your opening statement and move through a few different areas. Earlier I asked Chancellor Zimfer about outside contracts to do what might be services that appear to be normal CUNY services. The example I gave was the handling of transcripts. If somebody, for whatever reason, needs transcripts, it had turned out in one of the schools, at least one of the schools, they thought they were dealing with SUNY, and they were actually dealing with some Chicago firm that had screwed up. So I'm wondering if there are those kinds of services that the university contracts with, and whether those contracts are in or out of state. And I don't necessarily expect you to have that on the top of your head, but it is one of those areas.
I would assume the answer is yes, but I don't think ubiquitous at all in the university. The one that comes to mind, and we do this at a couple of our campuses, is some of the custodial staffs that we have, where we will contract out for services to clean and maintain a building or a set of buildings, as opposed to having, which is most of the cases at our campuses, people that are employees of the City University of New York and do the same thing. We also have had some involvement with outside security on a couple of our campuses. I would think that those would be the dominant areas of contracting. There probably are other very small things that we do, and I can certainly get a compilation of them. I don't see this as a big issue for us, but I can certainly compile that and get that to you forthright.
Ancillary to that is whether there is a large use of temporary workers.
Well, if you define temporary workers as part-time workers, We have lots of those people on our faculty. For example, we have about 9,500, maybe close to 10,000 faculty who are adjunct faculty who are not part of the full-time teaching core of the university, and we rely on them for coverage of, obviously, many of our classes. And that probably would be the biggest area that we have, certainly in the instructional area of the university. And of course, we hire people part-time, administrative assistants and people like that. But most of our employees are full-time people.
In the area of support, we don't have to go back over those things that are very clear about the compact. The only thing is that I always understood the notion of the compact as being a consistent or knowable state commitment. And I guess I'm asking whether or not you think that this budget reflects in any way what you had anticipated in terms of the reduction.
Well, this is not a good budget for CUNY. But let me just mention that straightforward. You know, an $84 million cut for me translates to about 850 full-time faculty. So, you know, take that number and that's full boat. That's with salary and fringe benefits. That's a significant number of full-time faculty. If we had that built into our base, I would open up the gauntlet and open up not the gauntlet, the faucet and the spigot. Thank you, Iris. The spigot, and have a flow of.
I thought Jay did communication.
Well, Jay does. If Iris had not given it to me, Jay would have been there immediately. 850 full-time faculty is a big deal for us, and that's what a cut of that nature is. So don't leave here thinking that this is a walk in the sun for us. It's not at all, and it comes on top of previous cuts. And there's just so much that you can stress the system where it's not going to have a very chilling effect. So yes, the budget cuts are real, and they have been continuous. And that is one of the reasons that I think we need to operate in a different way. We will always be a state institution. And I think, you know, the movement of public higher education to emulate private universities is not a good thing. 80% of the students who study in the United States study at public universities. And that's where the action is. And that's where the action will continue to be. And that's where I think it's critically important to preserve and protect our public universities. You know, 2 years ago, right before President Obama was elected, we brought to New York City some of the top leaders in public higher education. And we're going to do it again. We're going to do it in October, and I'd love, and Jay already is thinking about how to engage communities outside of the universities to participate in that discussion. We are facing peril in the United States. I have said this to this committee, and some of you raised your eyebrows when I said it. I think we're facing a national security problem if we don't support public higher education in the United States. Because if we don't educate our people so that when they leave they can compete in an economic environment that is totally unforgiving on two levels, skills and competition, the United States is going to be diminished as a country. We cannot afford. It's not that we're going to be attacked, but we are going to be compromised economically, and we cannot afford to do that. So when I see the chipping away at CUNY, I worry that we're going to be able to give our students the best experience we are capable of. And yes, we have raised a lot of private money. In 2005, we announced a $1.2 billion campaign. We got it done 4 years earlier. We're now going to do a $3 billion campaign. We have to do that, but that doesn't mean we're going to emulate a private university. I am obligated, as the chancellor of this university, to find dollars to support the educational life of our students. And if I can't get it fully from the state, which is where I need to get it from, I need to fill in the holes in other ways. That's what the CUNY Compact was about. And that's why I refer to it as a financing vehicle. It's a financing vehicle for investment. It's not about supporting the operating needs of the university. So back to your question, what the governor has proposed is covering our mandatory costs. That's critically important for us. If you don't have your mandatory costs, you cannot do the compact. What we need in addition to the mandatory costs, we fill in the rest of the blanks. I need to have gradual tuition imposed, and I need to have some of that money returned to the campus. And that's why 2 years ago we were successful, with your help and with the help of DOB, to get 20 cents on the dollar returned every time we levy tuition. This year it's 30%, and hopefully the law will continue to live so that next year will be 40%. To me, that was a major, and I think I used the term, paradigm shift. That was important for us. And so when you say, does the budget provide, if it would provide an opportunity for us to do gradual tuition increases, and when I say gradual, look at our record, 2% this year, 3%, 4%, that is the order of magnitude that we're talking about. If we can get that and our mandatory costs, then our presidents are going to support the philanthropy piece, and our management teams are going to support the efficiencies and productivities that we can monetize and put back into the system to spend money, and managing our enrollment in ways that will generate resources. That's the idea.
Thank you. As your enrollment has been growing, as your enrollment has grown, are you also seeing greater demand for programs like SEEK? And if so, how are you managing that?
Our SEEK program has been very stable. You did say SEEK. Yeah, our SEEK program has been very stable over the past several years, and the SEEK students are doing much better. Retention is higher, graduation rates are higher, and the program continues to serve an important need at the university, and we watch it very carefully.
At some of the schools, and I couldn't agree more that the community colleges are a critical gateway, but they are bursting at the seams. They're doing creative things like, doing weekends at campuses that have some space available, maybe reducing some of the travel time for some students, and doing all sorts of things. How close is the university to not being able to accommodate any more students?
We are, to use a tired phrase and a beaten-up phrase, we're bursting at the seams. You go to any of our community colleges, they are operating 7 days a week. Get there at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, you will see classes. Stay to 10, 11 o'clock at night, you will see classes. About a year ago, Jay Hershenson, and I just refer to him as Jay because everybody knows, Jay said to me, we ought to think about a 24-hour campus. And I said, what are you, crazy? We'll never be able to clean the campus and so forth. I think he's right. We are seeing more and more people so desperate to get classes and so challenged by the complexity of their lives that they are willing to come to the university at ungodly hours. The students are so motivated that we may indeed turn out to be a campus for many of our community colleges that will emulate almost a 24-hour-a-day experience. We're not there yet, but we're getting pretty close.
I think you touched on this, and it follows up on what Senator Stavisky was talking about. There seems to be a growing disconnect between the view of high school instructors as to what is making somebody college ready, and college instructors as to what is in fact the level of achievement of the incoming students. And some of that seems to be linked to a disconnect in curriculum, that there hasn't been the kind of change or innovation in curricula in the high schools, and it's translating into students coming in without sufficient background in some areas. And I will discuss this also with Dr. Steiner when he's available, but from the public schools in New York City, which is the largest influx of your student body, the figure I saw was that 70% of students, and I don't know if it was entering just the community colleges or not, were in need of some level of remediation. A, is that accurate? And B, what do you think CUNY can do, working with DOE, to make the adjustments necessary to improve the potential for success? And it sounds like some of it has to do with the way in which this particular program that you were focused on, as you said, it took money, took focus. But is there in fact, from literature I've been reading, there appears to be some disconnect on just even the curricula basis?
There has been a disconnect, I think, throughout the United States that universities have not spent enough time thinking about schools. Really, the place in the university that typically did think about schools, that's K through 12, were the education schools, because that was part of their life. You're right that about 75% of the students that come to our community colleges need to be remediated in at least one area: writing, comprehension, or mathematics. And that number is much lower than it was a few years ago, but it is still appallingly high and unacceptable. We are working and have been working. I think CUNY really has taken a lead in the United States, and it preceded me coming to CUNY. I'm not at all taking credit for this. We've just built on it. Really taking these silos that existed, CUNY and the DOE schools, and breaking the boundaries that separated those silos. Faculty are talking with one another. We're sharing data in ways that we've never shared data before, to really understand the data, to inform how we can communicate to teachers, parents, and students at the schools what the expectation is when they enter a university, whether it's CUNY or someplace else. We have a long way to go because the issues are deep and complex, but I think we are obligated to do that because we want our students to be successful. And with low graduation rates or low retention rates, a good part of the variance that explains that is very poor preparation. And we got to get our hands around that. And, you know, we train a lot of the teachers. SUNY trains a lot of the teachers that teach not only in the DOE schools, but across the state. We have to do a better job. The university has to do a better job, and certainly the schools have to do a better job of communicating and not being fearful of the discussion. And there was fear about, really showing the warts. And we have to get that off the screen and be truthful to one another and really try to help us. And we're really doing it in ways that we've never done it as much before.
Let me just ask one last question about where you are on capital needs and what the budget means to you in that regard. There is some continuation for critical maintenance, but as old as the SUNY schools are, many of CUNY schools are even older. So what is the current situation in terms of dealing with the problems that exist in many of the classrooms where maybe there are leaks, maybe there are windows that don't open or windows that never opened, or rain inside when it rains outside, those kinds of things that make it difficult for students and faculty to focus on what is really the business at hand.
I think Iris Weinschel can answer it with much greater depth and knowledge. Iris Weinschel, she could do it better. One of the things I will say is that we worked with SUNY a few years ago to develop a plan of what the critical maintenance needs are for both SUNY and CUNY, and we are delighted that this year, as last year, we do have in our capital budget about 285.
284 million.
Well, that's close. 284 is pretty close to 285. $284 million for critical maintenance at our senior colleges, or is that? So why don't you take it from there, Iris?
If the Chancellor's correct, this is the third year that DOB will be funding our critical maintenance program. To date, we've committed well over $200 million of the $560 million that was appropriated in the last couple of years. So we're putting that money to work. But clearly, many of our buildings are well over 30 years old, and they have many different operations that don't work correctly. And you're right, we've got roofing problems, we've got window problems, elevator, escalator problems. But with this money, we're able to address those needs. Let me just reiterate what the Chancellor said also. Beyond the critical maintenance, there are a number of projects which we call shovel-ready. They're fully designed and ready to go into construction. And we have appropriations for those projects, but a little more money needs to be added so that we can complete those projects. And so as the budget process proceeds, we're going to be coming by with our priority list. And if we can get this funding, then those projects can go into the ground and start construction.
Do you have a figure that we'll be hearing about?
Not a figure, but we'll be coming around with a number of projects.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Thank you. I'm just going to slide in here for a moment, Chancellor. When we talk about the issue of tuition differential, we get into a gray area. Sophie Davis, for example, it's a hybrid kind of a program. It's an undergraduate, yet it takes the form of a graduate program. What is the tuition policy in a situation like that?
What was the program?
The Sophie Davis Biomed.
The Sophie Davis School, which is a great program, Yeah, for those of you who may not be aware of this, this is a 7-year program where students are admitted right from high school. They attend City College, and at the end of 5 years, they get their undergraduate education in the first 2 years of medical education, the biomedical piece, and then they finish the last 2 years in a clinical setting at Mount Sinai or PNS or Downstate or one of those institutions. That would be something how we would differentiate the tuition for a hybrid like that, which I believe is unique in the university, would take some thought. And, I can't give you an answer right now, but I'd be happy to communicate to you what our thinking would be if we had the ability to do that.
As you point out, a great program designed around the ghetto medicine
Yes.
model.
Right.
And to take kids out of high school and to put them into a position where if they did qualify, and it has become much more competitive through the years, as it should be, it would be a departure from the mission of the program itself. If we created an artificial firewall, so to speak, that would make it difficult, if not impossible, for many deserving kids to participate in it. Okay, Senator Montgomery?
Thank you, Mr. President. Am I on? Yes. Okay, thank you. Chancellor, thank you. And I certainly agree with a couple of your statements in particular. One is that I think you're absolutely right that the lack of access to higher education for so many young people and young people who are being poorly educated is a homeland security threat. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I hope that you mentioned that you will be having a second summit for higher education professionals at some time. And I'm assuming that you will specifically include in that summit some of the presidents of the HBCUs who've been apparently more successful in the development of young people, particularly young African-American young people. I'd just like to ask you about the BMI program. I know that you have instituted this specifically to try and reach the most difficult sector of our student population, and that's young males of color. So I'm just curious to know what is the, what number of students you've been able to reach and what's the success of that program vis-a-vis the number of students who have been able to move through the system based on the BMI program.
The BMI program is
Black Male Initiative.
Black Male Initiative.
Program, yes.
It was started a few years ago, derived from the very good work of Edison Jackson,
Yes.
With a male empowerment program he had at Medgar Evers College. I then thought about it and wanted to scale it up at the university level. We're privileged to have recruited Elliot Dawes, who is the fellow who is our guiding light now in the Black Male Initiative, and this year his major focus was around health careers and problems of health mainly in urban areas, and he worked very closely with Ken Olden, who we recruited as our founding dean of the CUNY School of Public Health. Ken we recruited from the National Institutes of Health, where he headed up a very important directorate. So, in short, the BMI is alive and well. Many students are going through the various programs that we have at the various campuses. I would ask Pete Jordan, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, to put a little more texture on it, but that's the overall look at the program from 10,000 feet up. He can give you more detail.
Senator Montgomery, thank you for inquiring about the program, because it is one of the programs in recent years that the university has started that we are especially proud of. Currently, across the university, there are approximately 17 different programs going on that include structured mentorship for approximately 3,000 young men who are largely of African and Latino descent across the university. We are also privileged to have the support of private corporations and foundations like Deutsche Bank, as well as the Schwab Foundation, in terms of working with us and contributing to the support of this program. Over the last 2 years, those two organizations contributed over $750,000 to the support of this program. So we're really proud of the program. In addition to the health career focus that the Chancellor mentioned, there's also a focus on assisting young African American and Latino men in terms of entry into the legal profession, into law schools, as well as a focus on medical school and the teaching professions as well. So it's a signature program that we're really proud of, and it is so far proving to assist young men, urban males, in terms of staying in school and staying focused, creating community as well.
Thank you. Just if I could just pursue that. You indicate that there's $750,000 that you received in private foundation funding. What about the university funding itself? Do we have a budget for that internally, or how does that work? And does it relate at all to the ASAP program, or these are entirely different kinds of programs?
The ASAP program is different, although students who are enrolled in the ASAP program can participate in also in mentorship programs through the BMI program. I neglected to point out that, and to thank the City Council of New York for its support of the program as well. There we've received an average of $2 million a year for the last 5 years in support of this program. And of course, the university is also contributing through in-kind support in terms of staffing and so forth.
All right, so I guess I was anticipating that the BMI program would be a little bit more than mentoring. So I'm happy with the mentoring, but I thought we needed a lot more support, a deeper support, in order to make it really possible to reach some of the young people who are most difficult to reach. So I'm not clear about what the intent of it is, and I guess I was mistaken in my understanding of what the purpose of the Black Male Initiative was.
Senator Montgomery, you're not mistaken. Pardon my poor representation, perhaps, of the program in identifying just one aspect of the program. But overall, the focus of the program addresses access issues for students. But for students who are enrolled, it's also about providing them with structure, the kind of structure, counseling, academic counseling and support that is needed, as well as career development support for these students, and career, not only career, but financial literacy development as well. So there are a whole host of services and developmental opportunities that are provided for students in the program, and mentoring is one aspect of that.
Okay, thank you. It would be helpful if I could see where those programs are and just what exactly goes into making them unique in terms of their attempt to build a support for these difficult
We'll be
young
happy
people.
to provide that for you.
Definitely.
Thank you, I would appreciate that. I want to just raise another kind of issue related, but not exactly the same, and that is some of the campuses have college campus high schools, and obviously, apparently, they are very successful. I'm just wondering to what extent you view that as something that should be system-wide, and how could we support that happening more? And related to that, it's apparently many of the young people, especially the ones that we're talking about, the BMI group and others who have difficulty, start to really fall out in the middle school years. And so I'm wondering if there is any thought about a more intense intervention for middle school aged young people. And I know that's not your purview, not your responsibility, but neither is high school, and you've done a good job by taking on a piece of that. And I would just wonder if there is any thought or any possibility of planning to reach down to middle school?
Well, we do. I think probably the best example of that is our College Now program.
Okay.
College Now goes down as low as 8th or 9th grade, so that, those are middle school youngsters, and we work very effectively with them. With respect to the high schools, we have, I believe, about 18 high schools now that we take ownership with, and they are either on or contiguous to a CUNY campus.
Yes.
And on the books, we have some additional high schools, these early college high schools in particular, that we will be taking responsibility for. And those schools are some of the best performing schools in New York City.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I have two more questions, quick. One is, I always hear that the students are failing. So we measure success, or we refer to the success or failure of the students. And I contend that the students cannot be more successful than the level of expertise of the adults in the system. So my question is then, since there is obviously a relationship between the preparation of teachers and the success or failure of large numbers of young people, especially in public school, before they get to you, what are we doing to improve the quality of professional preparation so that we don't have teachers who are not actually prepared to go into a classroom, especially into classrooms where there are any number of issues that they have to deal with? What's happening with that?
We are fortunate to have David Steiner as the new Commissioner of Education. David derives from Hunter College, where he was considered one of the leading deans of education at the City University of New York. And so we were delighted that David ascended to the position of Commissioner at SED. He, among many things that he has to do, is going to officiate over a reformation of the way in which we train teachers. And Nancy Zimpher and I have met with David on several occasions, and with Merrill Tisch and other members of the regents to talk about a rethinking of how we train teachers, emulating a much more clinical model. Nancy Zimpher is much more of an expert in teacher education than I am, but I'm certainly participating in those discussions as well with our faculties. And a lot of the race to the top programs that we went through iteration 1, but iteration 2, I think, will be very much dominated by about the way in which we train teachers and how do we create a much more clinical kind of an experience to really see teachers being trained in ways to address just the kinds of issues that you're talking about.
And I fully support the new commissioner and his philosophy, and certainly I look forward to working to support him, continuing to support him as he seeks to upgrade our teacher training institutionally based. I just want to mention one last thing, and that is Medgar Evers College. I want to commend you and the trustees for a wonderful new president. I've met with President Pollard, and I have expressed to him, and he has expressed also his desire to have Medgar Evers continue to be an extremely important asset to the community. So it's not just a college, it is really so much more. And so I will be looking forward to when he presents to us, and I mean us broadly, as the representatives of that college in that borough, his plan, but also we will be bringing to him many of the issues that are not specifically college, but are related to the quality of life in so many areas and the needs in that borough, especially in the northern part of Brooklyn. So I'm sure he is going to need a lot more support, especially in both in academic areas, but also just in community support needs areas. So I look forward to us working with you on that.
Montgomery, I am very much responsible for putting search committees together for presidents, and I also spend a lot of my time going to every interview. And when I heard Bill Pollard during his interview, I had a little thought that said, this is going to be the next president at Medgar Evers, because he said something to me that really resonated deeply. And he said, my task is focused primarily upon student success. And he spoke eloquently at his interview about that, and that has been his focus. He's new to the institution. He's only been there for a few months, but he's assembling a first-rate management team, and with a brand new facility coming on board at Medgar Evers, I think Medgar Evers has a brilliant future with a wonderful new president that has a lot of energy and good ideas, and certainly working very closely with the people here at this table and other members of the administration.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Charles Levine.
Thank you, Chairman Farrell. Chancellor, yesterday I was reading someone's bio, and in the bio, it was a political bio, the fellow wrote that he took great pride in the fact that he had received a first-rate education at blank private college, which we would all know if I mentioned it. And I resented that a little bit, more than a little bit, as someone who thinks he got a first-rate education at a public university. So all the more reason on behalf of the 80% of us who rely on public institutions of higher education, all the more reason to commend you and your team for fighting so hard for public education, even in difficult economic times. Now, I've got a couple of brief questions for you and then an observation. First, what is your view about the governor's budget proposal to reduce TAP for financially independent married students?
Well, all of you know what the governor has proposed on TAP, and certainly that will have an effect on students, and it'll have an effect more on one class of students more than another. The moderating effect that we have not mentioned yet in these hearings is that there has been a big uptick in the amount of money provided through the federal financial aid program called Pell. Pell is going to be increased incrementally over 3 years by $400 to $500. And that's going to have a very stunning effect in helping students along as they meet the challenges of paying for higher education. And it'll have a particular effect on places like CUNY and SUNY, because if you're at an institution that's charging $25,000 tuitions, and we have many of those, the effect is not nearly as much as it would be at a place like CUNY, where our tuition is considerably lower. So while TAP is going down, Pell is going up, and that's a good thing. We'd like to see TAP go up and Pell go up. And, you know, that is something that I will leave to put in your good hands, because you have much more gravitas in that area than I do, but it is a concern that we have.
When you were discussing community colleges and the 3-year graduation rate, and
Yes.
some people would regard those statistics as being very alarming, you mentioned there were some good reasons for that and some bad reasons for people not graduating within the 3-year range. So
Yeah.
what would you consider some of the good reasons, if that's, and it's really not an appropriate phrase, good reasons, but I think you know what I mean.
Yes, and let me take a shot at that. Many of the students that start at a community college are living very complex lives. You know, when I went to CCNY as an undergraduate, and I finished in 4 years, and I worked the entire time I was at CCNY. Certainly over the summer I worked, but during the regular semester I worked maybe 15, 20 hours between weekends and sometimes after school. But when I came home, I had food on the table. I had a nuclear family. I had parents that cared about me. At least I thought they cared about me. I never felt vulnerable. I never felt insecure. But so many of our students today, and it's not just at the community colleges, but more at the community colleges, at the four-year campuses, are responsible for a child. It is their child. They are the single parent. They are struggling to pay the rent. They are struggling to pay for food. They are struggling to watch after their children so their children are paying attention in school and not getting into trouble. Those are the good reasons, if you want to use good and bad reasons, why so many of these students are not graduating. They're exhausted. They don't have the time to devote as much to their studies as we would like to see them. Oftentimes they are shut out of classes because it conflicts with their work schedule, or they have to run and take care of a child and have to be home with that child. So just the social consequences of living in a big city where challenges are very, very real and severe are reasons that many of these students don't succeed. The other reason, which was touched on by a few of you, is that many of these students come to a community college very poorly prepared. They are very poorly educated. And one of the wonderful things about this country is that we give students a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance. If they fall down, we pick them up, brush them off, and say, keep going. They fall down, we pick them up again. That's not true around the rest of the world. So we spend a lot of money giving people second and third and fourth chances, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, we are a rich enough country that we can look after the people that have been left behind. And I think CUNY has always had a value set that drives so much of what we do by those kinds of real experiences that the students have. And I would say that those are the major determinants in what would cause low graduation rates.
Thank you for that. And finally, my observation. You had mentioned that it's a matter of national security, that we train our students and educate our students so that they can be part of a vibrant workforce that's going to maintain our financial stability, and that is true. But may I suggest to you as well that we may want to have another reason that has to do with national security, and that's that if we can train our students and educate our students to have a wider world view than we have in the past, those students will certainly be better able to contain and defeat the forces of fundamentalism, and here's a college word, atavism, that threaten us on a worldwide basis.
Well
and
said.
I thank you for that. And thanks for listening to my little speech.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chancellor Goldstein and the Goldstein team.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.